All right. Welcome back, everybody. Today we are chatting with Gitana Mims. She is an artistic associate of Greenwood Lake Theater and has worked for us in, I'm just going to say a lot of capacities because I can't remember how many off the top of my head, but suffice it to say, you've definitely seen her work if you've seen anything we've done. She's worked with us as a music director, a show director, an education director, artistic staff of the theater. So she does a lot with us. Thanks for sitting down with me and having coffee.
So nice to have coffee with you.
All right. So we'll jump in. First question is, you have actually, aside from Mary and I, been with Greenwood Lake Theater the longest of anyone else working on this project. So you have been working with us since 2018. Oliver was your first show. Um, so clearly you must like us okay, because you keep putting up with us and coming back. So why us?
The buckets of money that you guys dump at my door.
Obviously, I knew it.
I will say that there were a lot of reasons, but there were two big reasons, one personal and one professional. So the personal being, I think when I walked into our theater space to do Oliver, it was the first time in my life where you guys met me and I was like, "Hi, I'm Gitana Mims. I'm your musical director." And you guys were like, "Oh, okay, yes, yes, you are." Like I didn't have to prove myself. I didn't have to be spoken over and like interject and be like, "Well, actually," like it was just I was taken on face value. And I wasn't even 30 at the time when I had that contract, so I was a younger woman then. I'm still a young woman who looks very young. You know this. It is an issue that we experience a lot working in this still male dominated industry. A lot of times we walk into rooms in positions of power and we are not treated like we are a person of power. And that gets discouraging. So right away, like to not have to deal with that off the top, to just be able to get like straight to the work and straight to the art was so amazing. Um, and then professionally, which I think that's a personal professional reason, I guess, but professionally, and I know I told you and Mary this both, opening for Oliver, I just believe so much in y'all's vision of theater, especially. I believe in your mission. I believe in what you're doing, to make art safe and accessible to everyone is so important to me. And I think that we do that so well. And it's one of the things I'm most proud of. And it's why I keep sticking around because I know that we are going to make safe and inclusive art. And that's what I want to do.
Well, I'm so glad that what we were doing ended up gelling with what you wanted to do because um, just for reference, Jatana doesn't actually live anywhere near here. Um, and so at the end of Oliver, at the end of her first contract, when she was packing up her things to get ready to go, I like literally lunged at her and like started screaming, "Please don't leave me." um, so
Immediately locked in a basement for 6 months.
it's fine.
And I think about the fact that I wasn't even supposed to do that show. I had never heard of Greenwood Lake Theater. It was a series of just happenstances that put us together. But it's those things that make me believe that there is some sort of cosmic destination for all of us. Because I know I was supposed to be with you guys. I absolutely know it. I know
You
that's great.
absolutely were. And it was and it was one of those weird things that I feel like this happens in theater maybe more than it does in some other professions, where the right people really find one another.
Mhm.
Um I had never met you before. We actually never met face to face until Oliver started. Um,
Not a thing back then. No one was doing
it was not. I honestly, I like tried to Google stalk you at one point. I was like, so I at least know who I'm looking for, like when I meet this person. Gitana was a recommendation from a college friend of mine who I hadn't seen this college friend in about a decade. So this was really like a, yeah, okay, let's see how this goes. And just, but I remember,
just one show. We won't talk about it.
but I remember from the very first conversation we had just over the phone, I was like, oh, I think she thinks about theater the same way I do.
Mhm.
And that's sometimes a rare thing. And something that's so important when you are trying to build something, because anybody starting a new company, it starts with just you and maybe one other person, but eventually it's too much work.
No,
And you have to start bringing other people into the fold, and because it's your baby, you really want to make sure they're the people that see things the same way you do, so that
well, and then on the flip side of that, also as an artist, of course, I've done all sorts of shows with all sorts of people who don't always share my opinions and my thought for art, and you make it work and you
of
make it
course.
happen, and it's beautiful and wonderful. But it's so much easier to make theater with people who think about theater and the world the same way that you do, to not have to have those baseline conversations just to like figure out where everyone stands on everything, to just know. And I think within a matter of days, like you and I especially had already developed our own like shorthand, like we just get it, we get each other, and things go so quickly, especially when you, I, and Mary are working on a project together. Things
Get
just
this
go
done.
so
Get it done.
when powers combine.
It's amazing. Every time I see what's right this second our profile picture on our company Facebook page, which is you and Mary and I plus McKenna.
Oh, our lady theater picture, the moving
Um,
picture.
we had, when that photo was taken, we had been, I don't know for how many hours in the summer, in the dead of summer.
3,000, I'm assuming.
Yeah, 3,000 hours. We had been hauling things around in a pickup truck. We were loading out of a former storage space. We were loading into a performance space. We were loading out of my garage, but also into my garage with some things. And and you know what? At the end of it, like, this was a brutal day that I think would put almost anybody in this horribly foul mood. And at the end of it, in this picture, like, we all look happy. I mean, like, we were, tired, but like, but we're smiling. And I just, that always, that really means a lot to me that we're able to do that, and have this environment where we can all still be smiling at the end.
Yeah. I
Because
tell people all the time, I know that when I come to do a show that it's going to be the hardest I work in my life. And I have no problem with that because it's work I enjoy doing with people I love doing it with. And it's when you can go to bed tired and know that I built an entire show today. Like that's a good sleep.
did
You
a
sleep
thing.
well.
We did a thing today. Someday, maybe it will get a little bit easier, but it'll still be fun. Um, so, um, so with this, I mean, this project is new for our company for sure. I think I've never worked on anything like this before. And so you are a part of the team who's actually crafting the story, putting this together from the absolute ground up, because this started off as a completely harebrained idea that I
It started
pitched to you and
completely
Mary,
off.
basically.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, what if we did this?
We took a walk and all of our lives changed.
I'm really glad you guys go along with me sometimes. Um, so, um, but besides actually creating this story with us, you're going to be one of only a couple people on the creative team performing in it as well. You're going to have a role in the show. Is that something you have experience with, like being a part of crafting your own role? No.
Go, well, yes and no, because I
Okay.
mean, sometimes you get a role and you know nothing about that character, and you're like, I have to build this character even though they're written, right? So we do things like that all of the time, but in terms of actually creating a character, no.
Okay.
The things that I've written, no one will probably ever see them. They're, it's my angsty millennial way of processing the world around me. And you do that by writing a play about it and then putting it in a lockbox. So,
Obviously.
that's all been very autobiographical and again, like processing things, but to actually create someone. And I think the thing that helped me, because that idea to me is terrifying, but we know that Tituba was a real person. So I
Absolutely.
really only had so much to create, but also history left out a lot about her. So there was a lot to do.
There's a lot of gaps to fill in. I mean,
A lot of
and
gaps.
truly, that's what I'm finding with all of the women were trying to write, you go in thinking, oh, well, this is easy. These were real people, like, and they were, but unfortunately, the women themselves left no record behind.
Right.
The only written records left behind were written by men in their lives, and typically in most cases men with kind of their own agenda about these women.
Right.
So it's a lot of it's like almost detective work,
Mm-hmm.
taking what you know of the culture and of the society of the time period, what is written, and trying to fill in the blanks a little bit,
Yeah.
or a lot of it, I guess, in this case. So with this new experience, writing your own role, essentially, um, anything that has stuck out as like particularly fun about that idea or particularly difficult about that idea?
I mean, the fun part is literally just getting to. I've been a history buff my entire life. I've always loved history. And it's been as an adult that I've realized that, oh, we get a very slim, narrow view of history. And so my personal, journey as an adult has been learning more about history outside of what they teach us in the classroom. And so to be able to, take this woman who I don't feel like historians have treated kindly. I feel like she's always been very expendable in all narratives and either a source of evil, which is just banana sandwich, or just, the slave girl. And so to actually be able to turn her into a person and examine her for her own motivations and her own life story has been beautiful and wonderful. And I love that I I've always been fascinated with Tituba, even, learning about the Salem witch trials in high school and things, and to be able to craft her with such love and compassion in a way that I don't feel like history has. Hopefully, wherever she is, her spirit is at peace, knowing that somebody does care about her. So that's been fun, and I think the difficulty in it though is wanting to be true to her, but not having any way to know that I am. That part is hard for me. And so I know that at the end of the day, because we are taking such care and compassion with all of our characters, not just Tituba, I know that we're doing justice to all of these women. And so that part does help.
It does. I mean, that's kind of, I was trying to explain myself to somebody, and I was like, I'm not representing this piece as being 100% historically accurate. I don't think anybody could make that claim.
Mhm.
I said, what I'm trying to do, what I want to do, what I want us to do is to do right by these women as best as we can.
Just to see them as people and not
Right.
these static creatures that they've always been, who, okay, well, women prayed and they did housework. Oh, and then sometimes they incited evil in a village. Yeah, like, well, let's take a few steps
Witches.
back.
um,
All they did.
and I think it is, and that's what's so interesting about looking at some of these women from a modern lens is, I mean, of course we know that no, there was more to them than that, because there's more to anybody than that.
Absolutely.
But that's the representation. And truthfully, to the people recording history at that time, um, that is probably how they appeared. Because I think a lot of the complexities of their lives were things that they kept to themselves.
Right.
And and it was expected that they would keep that to themselves. I was reading, I grabbed a new a new Salem book, well, and it was so interesting. They were talking about some outbursts that of course ended up leading to witchcraft accusations, and the reason they drew notice is, I don't think it was a rule necessarily, it was just an expectation that men could speak during meeting and women couldn't.
That
Like, it
seems.
was like, yeah, I was like, oh, sure, that makes sense. That all tracks. But you wonder if in this place where people are technically supposed to be at their most spiritual, their most open, their most everything, they're still not allowed to talk. Well, then what does anybody around them really know about them?
Right. Yeah.
It's nothing.
Well, I also think that that's something that all of us, grappled with in the very beginning was just understanding that culturally we will never understand, Salem in the 1600s because we are so far beyond that, and so getting past some of those cultural hangups and eventually just accepting, okay, we get it, women were treated poorly, we have to move on.
It is. I think we spent like many hours being like, wait, what? Like indignantly just like
Yeah.
making noises. And, and then, yeah, like just moving past that at some point because that is the nature of what we're talking about. Um, so speaking of Salem and the events of Salem, the witch trials, I mean, even though this happened over 300 years ago, it is something that I think has just so stuck in the popular imagination. And because of that, I mean, it has been told and retold and I think virtually every creative medium that exists, there is a telling of the Salem witch trials. So, in your view, as somebody creating yet another telling of it, why? Why another one?
Uh, well, first of all, I would argue that a large percentage of the tellings have been done by men. Even in our research, historically, I would say up until the 1980s and 1990s is really when, we have Marilyn Roach's book
Mhm.
and Francis Hill. But before that, it was men doing the historical investigation of this. And I hate to bring it back to this, but I think that the story, if told by a man is always going to be told different than if it's told by a woman. Like we just identify with these women, we understand what it's like to have to be in rooms and sit silent sometimes. And but also I just think the group like collective mind is so fascinating, mob mentality and all of that. And I think what people are capable of doing when they're scared is scary itself. And I mean, I think a large motivation for most people's actions, including the accusing girls, was fear.
Mhm.
I think the people living in Salem at the time, they had so much to fear. First of all, they were isolated from everyone else. They were surrounded by enemy combatants, which are our indigenous peoples. And they were up here and it was a new world and they thought God was constantly testing them and that the devil literally was just lurking around any corner. And all of this fear just culminated into this perfect storm of the devil is actually here, guys. This
Mhm.
is red alert. The devil is here. What are we going to do? And they did not handle it well.
Oh, and it's so interesting. So the book I'm reading now is Stacy Schiff's book on Salem, which is excellent. Um, and it was fascinating to me how matter of factly she put it. She was like, we think of it's a witch, it's a witch. She's like, we think of it today as like this extreme like supernatural paranoia. She was like, that's not how it was viewed then. It was viewed as an absolute fact of life.
Yeah.
Like this wasn't somebody.
Devoted to helping to spot witchcraft,
Right,
helping to spot.
right. And for people, to your point, living in such isolation. I mean, Massachusetts Bay Colony was an unforgiving place. It was cold. It was dark. They were so far from neighbors in a lot of cases. Um, there were a lot of things that would happen that came across as scary, and I think much like people throughout history have like kind of woven myths to explain things they can't understand.
Right.
I think that's where a lot of this came from is it was trying to explain something that they couldn't explain or was too scary to really think about. And so witches and the devil and that that explained it to
On
them.
one hand, I do understand that mentality. I was raised in a very staunch Southern Baptist household. And growing up with that religious vigor, you're taught that any feelings of unease, any fear, any anxiety about anything, that is from the devil. And so I would be scared out of my mind if I had to live in Massachusetts Bay Colony. For the geographical locations alone, a cold, dark winter, that's terrifying. And so I think people already being scared, you can't admit that you're having a human failing, which is not a
Right.
failing at all. It's a natural human response. You can't admit that. So it has to be evil works. I 100% understand that mentality. And I think that's what makes this story so scary, is
Mhm.
that things can progress so quickly. And I know, when we first started talking about the show, I was like, ooh, spoopy witches, because I love the occult. I love all of those fun those fun things. Um, but really the scary part of this story was what human nature can do.
Absolutely. And that's what I, because we're producing this with a partner organization and have been applying for grants and things like that. And that's one of the things I feel like I've reiterated a lot is please don't misunderstand what we're doing. This isn't a haunted house.
Right.
This isn't a spooky witch story. There's nothing remotely supernatural about the story we're telling. I said there's nothing we could come up with that is scarier than what actually happened.
Yeah.
I could not write something that good. and and so it's interesting trying to convey the truth of what may or may not have happened. I think is actually harder than us telling a spooky witch story. um, well, because
It's so easy to produce. It'd be
uh,
all effects, right? Like it just
nothing. It'd be nothing. Why didn't we go that way? um, we could
well, we
stick
chose
you on
to
a
go with
broom and you
the
could zip across the park and it'd be done. Rave reviews.
Mary would love to fly on a broom
You
across
know
the
she would.
park.
Rave reviews from everyone. And it's so hard too. I think uh, there are so many unknowns, not just in these women's lives, but in every facet of this story, as far as like motivations and triggers and things like that. I think there are a lot of theories from historians, and I think a lot of them are good,
Yeah.
but they're theories. We don't know. Um, so it's been, yeah, as I think being a history lover as well, for working on something like this, it's almost a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
On the one hand, you're good at research, you like research, and it makes that part of it easier. But as a lover of history, you get a little bogged down in, well, but we have to know what it was, what exactly happened, and we don't know.
Yeah.
And this is a play, and so you know, we're also going to have to take whatever artistic bend we decide to take.
Right.
Um, which I think in our case, again, we're trying to stay pretty accurate. I think most of our liberty is timeline compressions, geographic compressions, trimming down the number of people involved.
Yeah, like we've compressed some characters, multiple characters into like one character
Right.
here and there. So, but yeah, I'm genuinely proud of how much we wanted to stay true to the history that we do know, even though the accounts vary from account to account.
Which, honestly, going back through like like the depositions that were taken,
Mhm.
at the time in 1692, they vary from deposition to deposition of the same person.
It's literally two different men took the same testimony and it came out two different ways.
Very differently. So
Okay.
you read what you can into it, I guess. Um, but let's go back to your role for a second. Your role in the show, Tituba. Um, so obviously it'll come with a lot of challenges, and that's any role we take on is always going to have a lot of challenges. So setting aside the actual creation, the crafting of the role, and the storytelling of the role, when it comes to actually playing the role,
Mhm.
once we get to October, what do you anticipate being your biggest challenges with playing the role?
Oh golly. Well, I know that this particular role is written with probably more trauma than I've had in other roles.
Mhm.
And as an actor, like I was like, yes, I'm excited. I want to dig in and get to it. But then you think logistically, and it was literally you asking me, like, are you comfortable doing that night after night? Which doesn't get asked to actors a lot. Like, so thank you for asking that. Knowing what the role is going to entail, there are, I would
Mhm.
say, suggestions of violence. I don't think our
Yeah.
audience is actually going to see violence, but you will know that violence is taking place. And just that's always an experience as an actor. Even if I'm not being physically beaten, I still mentally am there as the character. And so I know that's going to be a challenge. And I'm really appreciative of our creative team that we're already talking about that now. And, the support that we're going to give all of our actors, because ultimately the majority of our actors, I would say all of our female actors, are going to be traumatized a bit in this show.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, going in and knowing that already, we're already giving so much more support to our actors than a lot of shows do. Um, and so for that, I'm proud. I think that's going to be the biggest challenge. One challenge that I'm really excited about is just not being on a stage, being in an open space and actually being able to play. This is all of my little kid, like immersed in my imagination, dreams come true. This is like the hours I would spend in my backyard, in medieval England or wherever I was. I now get to do it. And that's so exciting. But for someone who really loves having the boundary of a stage where I know people can't get to me, it's also a little bit nerve-wracking.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as a fellow spent much time in medieval England in my backyard child, uh, yeah, there is something about it where I'm like, oh my gosh, how exciting to be there and to be
Yeah.
able to move through a real space and all of that. But you're right. There's safety in a proscenium stage with like your world begins and ends with a wing, and a stage edge,
Yeah.
and then a backdrop. Like it's confined and it's safe, and you have to use your wonderful actor imagination so much more, I think, in that scenario. But yeah, there's going to be some interesting, I think, just like logistical challenges for everybody in the show. Like, oh, hey, I have to get, I mean, our playing site for reference is a full acre. Um, it's a relatively large space. It's certainly bigger than a regular proscenium stage. So it's going to be physical for the actors. I mean, I think doing this will be tiring. Acting's always tiring, but now we're acting in like hauling across this space
Carrying things, I have to do work.
to do stuff. Um, so yeah, I think it will be a challenge for everybody involved, but I'm really excited to see your Tituba. Um,
Yeah.
um, so to wrap up, any part of the process as we've been creating this thing from the ground up, has anything really surprised you, or has it mostly gone kind of how you thought it would go?
Honestly, it's been a much easier process than I was expecting. I know when I write, it's like, again, very angsty. So I'm very nerve wracked and I'm like, am I doing this right? And, do I need to have a storyboard? And, I turn into a serial killer with cards on my walls and things like that. But this process has just been so, so easy because I think where I lack in one area, you, Mary, or Casey make up for it. And
Mhm.
we all balance each other. And I think because of that, we've been able to move this along pretty quickly
Yeah.
and very efficiently. And I just keep thinking back, and I know that you heard this too. I remember growing up, everyone saying, well, girls can't work together because they just fight too much and they can't do anything. And those words have been ringing in my head for the past 6 months. And I just want to be like, where? Show me where. Show me
Show me one time
the easiest process. And I'm
ever.
not in the same state as you guys. And technology has been immensely helpful to this
Yes.
project. But when you told me in October, I had such a different idea of how this was going to go. I thought it was going to be like hour-long phone calls where we're painstakingly and we're just doing our thing
Yeah.
and filling in gaps for one another, and it's been such an enjoyable process. I will say that.
It really has. I think I was surprised by that too when I called you with this ridiculous notion in October. Um I honestly expected, yeah, one of two things to happen. Either you or Mary was going to like talk me down and be like, you're a lunatic and we're not going to do that. um which would have been fair. So, um, or
It was like, tell me more. What
yes. Um, and well, because I mean, for Mary and Jatana who work with me regularly, they can tell you I call with a ridiculous idea like maybe once a month usually. And most of them don't happen because they're ridiculous ideas.
just get pared down. They go from
Yeah.
here to here.
Yeah. I do need a lot of scaling back. So, but this one, like all of a sudden I was, pitching it and I pitched it to Mary, pitched it to you, and you were like, yeah. And I was like, well, wait a second, maybe I'm not crazy. And so then I started calling up more people and being like, does this sound like a thing? Um, so once that part cleared, once I passed muster with you and Mary, I think that's also what I expected was this would just be excruciating. Yeah, like that it would just be excruciating. Not that it wouldn't be worth it or any of those things, but that it was just going to be when we sat down and we finally said, okay, we need to like map this thing, like who is where and where are they moving. I was like, oh God.
I know.
And it was fine. Like it was fine.
And that was the part where, my director brain kicked in. And I think, again, that's it's important that everyone on our team has such different skills. Casey is also a director. And so I think having those two brains, those two director brains to be able to see things, because I know I've been picturing this show a lot from like a bird's eye point of view. So that's how I see it a lot. And literally once we got into it, I was like, oh, this all makes sense. These tracks make sense. Now, once we have bodies doing this, that's gonna
it could be
why we planned the time.
right. No, I mean, look, this is by far the longest lead time we've ever had on a project. I mean, it'll be a full year end to end by the time we open, which is amazing. And I'm really grateful that we've had that much time. But yeah, it was so funny. And again, just I'm so glad we all have like varying and complementary skills because all of a sudden I was like dreading doing this and I opened our Miro board, our like interactive workspace, and you had already made like these like beautiful maps and like all these little shapes we could move around to represent the different characters. I was like, oh, well, that was the part I was dreading doing. I'm not good with computers. So I'm just not. And so I was like, oh, well, now we just have to click on these little things and move them around. And it's like playing chess. I mean, it's, and so then like, I don't know, a week later it was done. Then it was done. And then Casey and I went and walked the space a week ago so I could like kind of see it in real time. I was like, oh yeah, no, all of this still works. Cool.
Yeah.
And that may be different and we might have to adjust once we have bodies in the space. We'll have to adjust when we have bodies in the space. But it's kind of interesting to like at every checkpoint be like, oh my gosh, this is actually working.
I know.
This is actually going to be a thing.
And I think especially in theater, we get this fear like things are going too well. Why is something going wrong right now? But things are going well.
It is. It's honestly weirdly one of the smoother projects I've ever worked on. And some of that may be as a producer, a theater producer. I've done this with some like film and TV stuff, but as a theater producer, I haven't produced original work. And there is something about not being tied to an idea or something that somebody else has, because when we run into something that doesn't work,
We just fix it.
then we just fix it and we change it. And there is an enormous amount of freedom in that
Yeah.
to say, oh, well, okay, so we can't do it that way. Logistically, we don't have enough people, or they're not in the right places, or X, Y, and Z. And then, so you just write something different and then it does work.
And I think that's one of the reasons why I love theater so much is when you start a project from start to finish, it is just problem solving, especially when you're a director. So in the positions, I problem solve a lot. And it seems like every other show, like my problem solving energy has been here. But for this, I'm like, oh, okay. So here's my problem solving energy. This is easy,
Yeah.
easy. Yeah, it's whoo.
I have been, and you could certainly attest to this, way mellower throughout this than I ever am otherwise.
Yes.
Like, I almost like, it's so fun. I almost feel like I'm like playing really large scale dress up with my friends.
Which is
Not like, I know that like the stakes are higher than that, but that's kind of how I feel.
yeah. It's a great feeling.
Yeah, speaking of like, women don't work well together. I beg to differ. I've been playing year-long dress up with my friends. And it's magic. Just be like, oh yeah, no, this would be fun. What if we did this? Okay.
I mean, it's great. It's been a wonderful process, and I know that the closer we get to actual production, things are going to ramp up because that's what happens. But I also I trust our team implicitly, and I think working in the team that we have, especially you, me, and Mary, we know each other so well. Casey fits with us just so wonderfully. So I'm the closer we get, I mean, the more excited I get. So I
I feel
cannot wait.
like I feel like Casey is a great addition to our group. Honestly, when you were saying the thing about like girls just fight when they work together, I was honestly trying to picture Casey Morris like fighting with someone. And I was like, what would that even be? Just like,
The silent type. Like she would, let someone vent and then she would just hit them with like a quip that just eviscerates them and
yeah,
walks
and
away.
then just leave. Yeah, that's
No,
accurate.
no fuss.
But yeah, it's been a pretty great process, and I can genuinely say I've like enjoyed the ride.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying the process, and I'm usually in a rush to get everywhere with theater, and but I am not with this. I'm enjoying how we get to October.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like every month I'm like, oh, that's this year. It was so easy last year. I'm like, that's a year away.
Well, even in January, it was like, oh, October is so far. But I'm like, we are almost in May now.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's the thing. I don't know. Maybe I'll start, maybe my fear energy will start kicking in when we start actually selling tickets, but maybe not.
We need that. No, we like this Katie energy that you're
Ah,
right.
no, this is having a great time. I'm gonna stage manage in a Puritan costume, and it's gonna be great. Psyched.
Dreams come true.
How many pockets I'm gonna have put into my Puritan dress?
Oh my god.
It's gonna be awesome. Actually, I will say, and this is very important, every woman will have pockets in her costume.
We love pockets.
How are you supposed to carry stuff? Just, it's ridiculous. All right. Well, is there anything else that we didn't get to talk about with Salem that you want people to know?
I want people to know, especially in the Greenwood Lake and Warwick area, that we thought a lot about them also while writing this show. And that I personally, and I know you and Mary also, we genuinely miss that community and we miss seeing those people. Not living there for me is, hard sometimes because especially my kids that, I met through the intensive, I miss all of my babies. But I just want people to know that we are, as much fun as this has been for us, ultimately we are doing this for them. And this is our, in a lot of ways, a love gift to that community who has been so good to us. And so I really hope that everyone comes and sees it and supports the show, because it's just as much for them as it is for us. So
Oh, that is a perfect note to end on. So I am going to stop recording.